Blog Talk Radio.
All Pro Media Group Radio showcases professionals on a daily basis. Be inspired and listen to experts from around the globe share their accomplishments with you. APMG Radio, success at its finest. You're listening to APMG Radio. I'm Lucy, and today I'm pleased to introduce our special guest, Jesuit Father Raymond Helmick. Father Raymond, thanks for joining us today.
Well, it's very good to hear from you, Lucy.
Thank you again for choosing us and being on our show. So tell us a little bit about your background.
Well, I'll tell you, I'm a Jesuit priest. I'm 82 years old, as a matter of fact. I've spent a great part of my life working with people in conflict situations. I've been a mediator, conciliator in Northern Ireland, in various parts of the Middle East, not just Israelis and Palestinians, but Lebanese and Kurds and many others, in the Balkan countries. And what I've been finding over the last few years, I've been trained as a theologian, and I teach theology at Boston College, much of it about reconciliation. I don't think that a theology department is the worst place to talk about reconciliation. But I've been very aware of the internal conflict, the almost a civil war that is going on inside the Catholic Church. That's something very much of concern to me. I published a book a few years ago on what I called living Catholic faith in the Catholic Church, the problems that face people trying to deal with the conflicts. And now I've been giving a course since then on what I call the crisis of confidence in the Catholic Church. I've done a book out of that, which is just about to be published. It will come out early in the year, called that, The Crisis of Confidence in the Catholic.
How can we go about moving forward with everything that's taking place and what you had just said there about what you have researched, what you know is currently an issue and is continuing to carry on? How can we move forward in a different route?
Well, I'll tell you, I think we're doing it right now. As I was writing this book, I thought I had finished the book back on a Friday evening, the 8th of February this year, and it had concluded with recognition. We've had some very great popes. We've had Pope John Paul II, who accomplished such things. He was most important to the fall of the whole Soviet system and the whole domination of a dominating kind of communism. He was very good ecumenically. He was very good in developing interreligious relations. But he was so bent on the centralization of authority in the church that he really left us more dominated, more control consciousness than we had ever had before. We had another extraordinarily good man, Pope Benedict XVI, who understood as he was elected that he was elected to produce continuity, and he did that. And nothing much happened to relieve this crisis of disappointed hopes that had been left by the nullification of those things in the Second Vatican Council. Now we have Pope Francis, and all of a sudden, I'll tell you, I thought I had finished my book on the 8th of February. On the next Monday morning, the 11th, I woke up to the news that Pope Benedict had decided to resign. And decided, well, let's see what happens. This could be extremely good news. And what has happened since in the working of Pope Francis has really been so encouraging to me in looking at the crisis in these terms. I think we're realizing that people who had become very disillusioned with the Catholic Church are listening very carefully to Pope Francis, are very aware that something quite new is happening in the church, and that there is a new emphasis on the kinds of things that are gospel teaching, that the outlook of the church is suddenly very much brighter. My book became a much happier book as a result of that.
Crises of confidence in the Catholic Church.
All right. As I told you, I think that the Second Vatican Council was right at the center of this. The way I laid the book out, there are a dozen chapters, and the 4 middle chapters are about the Second Vatican Council, the things that were accomplished there. And I really feel that those are such a critically important way of dealing with the long-standing crises of over-demanding, over-controlling, dominant government in the church. It's not at all what is described in the New Testament. And for us to be able to get back to it, we had a most extraordinary Pope beginning in 1958, Pope John the 23rd, who was really responsible for the Second Vatican Council. I'll tell you the things in his background that are most extraordinary. He was born by the beginning of the 20th century. During the First World War, he was already an ordained priest, but he was drafted into the army, as everyone was in Italy at the time. And he spent the war scraping up bodies and wounded people off the battlefields as a medical man, as an orderly. That is a kind of experience that really sticks with someone. He went on into the diplomatic corps of the Vatican. He didn't get the big jobs. He was the papal nuncio to Bulgaria for a while, which is not a center of Catholic life exactly. And then he went on to Ankara, to Turkey, and was there right through the Nazi period, the period of the Jewish Holocaust. He spent his time as nuncio in Turkey rescuing Jews out of every part of Europe. He really came to understand the whole Jewish question very thoroughly. He would give Jews false baptismal certificates for their safety in order for them to get wherever they wanted to go, and he would help them to go, whether to Palestine as it was at that time, or to any other part of the world. By the time he finished, this was all done at great personal risk to himself. By the time he finished, all right, something happened in 1944. Charles de Gaulle returned to France. He realized that most of the Catholic bishops of the country had gone over to the Vichy regime to support of the whole Nazi invasion. He demanded that they all be fired. All the heads rolled, and great turnover in the Catholic leadership in France. At New Year's, it is custom in France that the president of the country holds a diplomatic reception. The papal nuncio in any of these Catholic countries is the dean of the diplomatic corps. So de Gaulle announced just a few days early that he would not receive the papal nuncio, who had himself been very Vichy-oriented. And the Vatican had to scramble all of a sudden. Who can we stick in there quick to be the dean of the diplomatic corps in France for the New Year's reception? And they pulled Angelo Roncalli, the nuncio out of Turkey, put him in as the nuncio to France. All of a sudden, he was big time in the Catholic diplomatic corps. Period. He was there into the 50s. And something else had been happening during the Second World War. This has to do with the Catholics turning to ecumenical thinking, to reconciliation with other churches, with the Protestants, with the Orthodox. The Orthodox were probably less in focus at first, but where did that ecumenism come from? My understanding is that Catholic ecumenism really came out of the resistance in the Second World War. The churches, none of the churches did very well in the Second World War. They all ran for cover, cooperated enough with the Nazi invaders to prevent getting into too much trouble. The people who were the resistance were mavericks. They were regarded by their own institutions, churches, or whatever else they belonged to, as troublemakers. They had to be afraid that if their leadership understood what they were doing, they would turn them in. So they had to find out, who can they trust? And it turned out that the people they could trust in the resistance were some Catholics, some Protestants, some socialists, some atheists, some agnostics, but these were the people that they could really trust their lives with. And by the end of the war, that had grown into an ecumenical openness, ready to hear each other, ready to take one another seriously. Catholics and Protestants had been screaming at each other for 4 centuries by that time, each believing that the others weren't really Christians. Now there was a big difference.
Before where we are in today's moment, how does it feel to have this freedom to be able to express and share what you have done in this book?
Well, we're a strange culture within the Catholic Church. The ordinary response is make no waves, make no complaints, act as if everything is all right. And I've been allergic to that all my life. I think working in conflicts, I've always had to say exactly what I thought. I've always taken it that everyone is to be treated with respect, but they must be told the truth as I see it. When I've worked, for instance, in Northern Ireland, I was dealing with every conceivable paramilitary leader, with the membership of the paramilitary groups, Protestant and Catholics. I always wanted to tell them straight what I believed. I also wanted to find out what's behind their thinking. Instead of thinking that these were some sort of psychopaths, the men of violence, whom everyone condemned, I wanted always to treat them with respect, understand that what they were doing, even though I'd find it very repugnant, they were doing for reasons that made sense to them. And therefore, I needed to listen carefully and treat them with full respect.
Thank you again. It's been a pleasure having you on the show, Father Raymond.
And I thank you very much.
You've been listening to APMG Radio with my special guest, Father Raymond Helmick. This show and many others can be found at allpromediagroup.com. Thank you all for joining us today. I'm Lucy, and you've been listening to APMG Radio. All Pro Media Group Radio showcases professionals on a daily basis. Be inspired and listen to experts from around the globe share their accomplishments with you. APMG Radio, success at its finest.